There is something about the end of summer that should feel safe, peaceful, even nostalgic. But for some, those final warm nights before autumn bring horrors that cannot be explained away. Imagine lying in bed and hearing tapping beneath your floor, even though your parents swore the house had no basement. Imagine pulling away from a lonely highway, only to realize the abandoned car you saw yesterday is now connected to a missing person who was never found. Imagine camping alone in the wilderness, waking to find a silent figure just 15 feet from your tent, waiting in the moonlight. These are not urban legends, these are real encounters. Terrifying, disturbing, and all too possible. Tonight you will hear 3 true stories of what can happen when the comfort of summer gives way to the shadows that lurk beneath it. Welcome to The Price Paid, where we uncover the true cost of stepping into the unknown. If you dare, subscribe now and join us as we descend into the kind of darkness you cannot escape once you've heard it. Because when the summer ends, not everyone makes it out alive. It was supposed to be just another quiet week at home before heading off to college. My parents had recently moved after years of talking about downsizing, and this was the first time I had the house entirely to myself. They insisted there was no basement, only a small crawl space for utilities, and I believed them. But from the very first night, something felt wrong. I was lying in bed when I heard it tapping. Not random creaks or distant noises you could explain away as an old house settling, but deliberate taps, steady in rhythm and consistent in volume. It was coming from beneath me, right under the floor. The room I slept in was on the first floor, and below me there was supposed to be nothing but dirt and foundation. The sound was unsettling because it felt purposeful, as though someone was down there signaling. I told myself it was probably pipes, or maybe some animal that had found its way into the crawl space. Eventually the noise stopped, and I convinced myself it was nothing serious. The following night, however, it returned, louder this time, sharper. It echoed beneath my bed in a way that was impossible to ignore. Again, I tried to rationalize it, maybe a raccoon, maybe a stray cat, but even as I thought it, I knew deep down that explanation didn't fit. The noise was too calculated. On the third night, things escalated beyond taps. I heard scraping, dragging, like something being pulled across concrete. Every so often, it sounded like claws raking against wood. The sound traveled across the length of the floor, directly beneath me. I lay frozen, listening, while my heart pounded in my chest. It was no longer possible to tell myself it was just the quirks of an old house. The next morning, I told my dad about it over the phone. He brushed it off, suggesting I check the crawl space for an animal. I didn't want to, but I forced myself to. Crawling under the porch, dirt pressing against my clothes, I shone my flashlight into the dark. My stomach twisted as I searched, bracing for something horrific. But there was nothing. No animals, no signs of disturbance. My dad seemed satisfied with that, but I wasn't. The unease clung to me, like the tapping had somehow left an imprint I couldn't shake. Determined to figure it out, I searched the perimeter of the house later that day. At first, nothing stood out. Then I noticed a stack of old construction materials piled against the siding tarps. Rotting lumber, blocks of concrete. They looked like they had been there for years. On a whim, I started moving them aside, thinking maybe they concealed a hole where animals were getting in. Instead, what I uncovered made my skin crawl. Behind the debris was a storm door. Old, rusted, partially painted over, but undeniably an entrance. My parents had been wrong. The house did have a basement. I wish I could say I turned around and walked away, but some mix of dread and curiosity pushed me forward. I pulled open the heavy door, revealing a flight of concrete steps vanishing into darkness. Each step down felt heavier, as though I was descending into a place I was never meant to see. At the bottom, the beam of my flashlight revealed a space that was unmistakably lived in. Empty food containers, crumpled wrappers, discarded bottles. But that wasn't the worst of it. The walls bore markings. Not graffiti, not anything playful. Deep scratches etched into wood. Tally marks that stretched endlessly upward. On one pillar, grotesque drawings. Crude images of people and animals, twisted into distorted, nightmarish forms. They looked demonic, obscene, the kind of drawings you could imagine someone making in isolation, their mind spiraling into madness. The air was thick, damp, suffocating, and I realized I was breathing faster, my body telling me to get out. I didn't linger. My flashlight shook as I retraced my steps up the stairs, slamming the storm door shut behind me. My hands trembled as I called my parents, explaining what I'd found. Their shock was genuine. They swore they never knew a basement existed. My dad repeated the same question over and over. Was I sure no one was down there now? I told them it was empty. They promised to cut their vacation short and return immediately. But that night, I learned the basement wasn't as abandoned as I had thought. I woke to violent banging, rattling so loud it reverberated through the house. The sound came from outside, where the storm door was. Someone was trying to get back in. My body froze as the pounding grew more aggressive, the door rattling in its frame, as though it might give way at any moment. The silence that followed was even worse. I forced myself to the window and peered out, just in time to see a figure sprint across the backyard into the night. I couldn't make out details, only a silhouette, human, fleeing. The police came after I called, combing through the basement and the surrounding property, but they found nothing. They offered to increase patrols, but there wasn't much else they could do. When my parents returned the next day, they promised to secure the place, to figure out something permanent. But the truth gnawed at me. Someone had been living beneath us, in the shadows of our own home, carving madness into the walls, drawing horrors I couldn't even describe without shuddering. And they had come back. Even now, as I sit far away at college, I cannot stop thinking about it. The tally marks, the drawings, the sound of that frantic pounding. My parents live there still, sleeping above whatever secrets lie in that basement. And I wonder if the person who made those marks has truly left, or if they are just waiting for the right moment to return. There are some moments in life that you cannot shake, no matter how much time passes. For me, one of those moments came on an otherwise ordinary August morning, during the last stretch of summer in my quiet Montana town. Nothing much ever happens out here. That's partly why I stayed, while so many others moved away.
Did you hear that?
Life is simple, predictable. But that day, the silence of rural life broke into something darker. I was driving my usual route to work, a 2-lane highway cutting through farmland and low hills. The air was heavy with that late summer stillness, the kind where you can almost feel the season turning. About 15 minutes out of town, I noticed a car on the shoulder. It was an older light blue sedan, angled slightly toward the ditch. At first, it didn't seem like much. Cars break down out here all the time. No hazard lights, no one standing around it looked abandoned, but in a harmless way. I slowed down to take a look, scanning the windows. No one in the driver's seat, no passenger, not even in the back. Empty. I told myself someone probably walked off to find help. That's the kind of thing that happens in rural areas. I drove on. By the time work ended, I had almost forgotten about it. But on my way back, I saw it again. Same car, same spot, only this time the driver's side door hung wide open. That door hadn't been open in the morning. My stomach sank as I drove past, craning my neck to see if anyone was nearby. There wasn't. No tracks, no movement, just that car sitting like a strange monument to something unfinished. The open door made it impossible to ignore. Whoever had been in that car had left in a hurry, and they hadn't come back. I pulled over once I had cell service again and called the non-emergency line. I described the car, its location, and what I had seen. The operator thanked me and said someone would check it out. I went home thinking that was the end of it. But a week later, while having breakfast, I caught the local news. They reported that police were investigating a missing person case. A vehicle had been found abandoned along a stretch of rural highway just outside town. My heart dropped. I didn't need them to say more. I knew it was the same car. They didn't release the man's name, but they said he was from out of town and he never arrived where he was supposed to. They claimed there were no signs of foul play, no witnesses, nothing unusual. I sat staring at the TV, uneasy. The way they brushed it off didn't feel right. Out here, people talk. We hear things through unofficial channels. My brother Benjamin is a firefighter, and I knew he might have heard more. I called him later that day. At first, he didn't know much. Just that the sheriff's office had circulated a memo about the car and the missing man. He said maybe the police would organize a search. I asked him to help, to use his connections to get involved. He was confused why I cared so much, but I couldn't let it go. That abandoned car felt like it was following me, demanding I find answers. Eventually, he agreed. Within a couple of days, he had arranged for us to join a search party. The search wasn't huge. A few officers, some off-duty firefighters, and me. We focused on the area near the road where the car had been, left a patch of shallow woods and some old irrigation ditches. From the highway, it looked empty, just overgrowth and weeds. But once you were in it, the terrain felt endless. Easy for someone to disappear, easy for something to stay hidden. Benjamin and I searched together, moving slowly through the brush. About an hour in, a pair of searchers radioed. They had found something. We converged on their location, where a small maintenance shack stood half sunken into the ground. It was the kind of structure you'd never notice driving past. Overgrown vines curled up its sides, the wood sagging from years of weather. The door hung slightly ajar, its lock snapped. Inside, the air was stale, thick with the smell of mold. But scattered across the floor were signs of recent activity: empty bottles, food wrappers, a blanket crumpled in the corner. Someone had been there, and not long ago. My eyes adjusted to the gloom, and then I saw it. A hole in the back wall. Splintered edges, sharp, clean, deliberate. A bullet hole. We searched frantically for more shell casings, blood, anything, but there was nothing else. Just that single hole, like evidence of a moment that had vanished with the people who caused it. The officers radioed it in, their voices tense. I knew then that this wasn't just a missing person case anymore. Something violent had happened here. But before we could investigate further, the lead officer gathered us outside. His tone shifted from polite to firm. He told us the police would handle it from here, thanked us for our help, and asked everyone to leave. When I protested, he singled me out, reminding me I was a civilian. Reluctantly, I stepped away, frustrated and unsettled. Later, Benjamin admitted that not long after I left, the officers cleared out the firefighters too. They wanted control, total control. Over the next weeks, the case went quiet. No updates on the news, no whispers through local channels. Benjamin's contacts claimed they didn't know anything more, which was strange in itself. It was as though the story had been erased. Unable to let it rest, I returned to the site on my own. I knew exactly where the shack had been. I followed the ditches, the terrain etched into my memory. But when I arrived, it was gone. The shack was nowhere in sight. Not collapsed, not burned gone. I combed the area for hours, circling wider and wider, but there was nothing but overgrown scrubland. I stood there, confused, chilled by the silence. Two possibilities filled my head. Either my memory had betrayed me, or someone had deliberately removed the shack. The latter made more sense. It wouldn't be impossible to haul it away, though it would take effort. But why? Why erase it so completely? I drove home that day with a weight in my chest, a feeling that I had brushed up against something bigger, something hidden. Every year when summer ends and the air shifts to fall, I think about that blue car, the bullet hole in the shack, and the way it all disappeared. It's as if I glimpsed a secret I was never meant to see. For as long as I can remember, the end of summer meant camping. It was a family tradition my dad started when I was a kid, a way to mark the last days of warmth before school resumed. Even as I grew older, I held on to it. Some years my dad and brother joined me, but more often than not, I went alone. My girlfriend hated camping, and I didn't want to drag her into the woods where she would be miserable. So I learned to embrace the solitude. Last August, I found a spot on a map that looked perfect. It wasn't an official campsite, just a remote clearing far from any trails or roads. That was exactly what I wanted: silence, privacy, the feeling of being cut off from the world. I downloaded the map, packed my gear, and set out for 3 nights of peace in the wilderness. The hike in took about 2 hours. I carried a heavy load but paced myself, enjoying the stillness of the pine forest. When I arrived at the clearing, it was everything I had hoped for. Flat ground, thick trees surrounding me, and an open patch of sky above. That first night was perfect. I built a small fire, cooked a meal, and lay on my back stargazing. For a while, it felt like I had stepped out of my own life into something timeless, where nothing could touch me. The next morning, I decided to hike to a river I had marked on my map. I thought maybe I could catch a fish for dinner, something to make the trip feel more authentic than living off freeze-dried meals. The river was further than I expected, but when I finally got there, it was beautiful water rushing over rocks, surrounded by towering trees. I spent hours fishing, losing track of time until I realized the sun was already sinking. By the time I packed up and started back, it was later than I should have allowed. Within 20 minutes, the sky turned from golden to gray, then to black. I strapped on my headlamp and pushed through the brush, annoyed at myself for miscalculating. That's when I saw it, a light in the distance swaying back and forth like someone carrying a lantern or flashlight. Relief washed over me. Maybe another camper was nearby. Maybe we could walk back together. I called out, my voice friendly, asking if they were camping too. The light froze. For several seconds, it hung motionless in the dark. Then, just as suddenly, it vanished. No slow fade, no explanation, it clicked off, leaving me staring into nothing. A few seconds later, I heard crashing through the underbrush. Not toward me, not away, but off to the side, perpendicular to my path. Someone was running, fast. My heart raced as I stood there, headlamp casting a narrow circle of light around me. Everything about it felt wrong. If I had startled someone, why wouldn't they say something? Why would they bolt through the forest in the dark? risking a fall. I tried to tell myself they were scared, just like me, but deep down, I knew this wasn't normal. I pushed forward, walking faster than before, and made it back to my camp just as the unease fully set in. I was so unsettled, I didn't even bother cooking the fish I had carried back. Instead, I crawled into my tent, ate some packaged food, and tried to read by flashlight. Sleep came eventually, but it was restless. Sometime in the night, I woke suddenly. I couldn't say why. There was no sound, no movement that I could detect. Just a heaviness in the air, a sense that something was off. I listened to the forest noises, the usual chirps and rustles, but nothing out of the ordinary stood out. Eventually, I decided to step outside to relieve myself. I unzipped the tent quietly, pushing my head out into the clearing. The moonlight was bright enough to illuminate the space, and that was when I froze. 15 feet away, a figure stood perfectly still, facing my tent. A human silhouette, motionless, watching. My blood turned cold. This was not a hiker, not another camper. No one should have been there. My body refused to move, my mind racing through possibilities. Surely they had heard me unzip the tent. Surely they knew I could see them. For a moment, I thought I was seconds away from being attacked. My instincts kicked in. I grabbed the switchblade I always kept near the tent entrance and forced my voice steady as I shouted, demanding to know who was there. The figure didn't hesitate. The moment I spoke, it sprinted straight toward me. Full speed. No warning, no words. Just a piercing, unnatural shriek that sounded less human than animal. My body reacted before my mind could. I stumbled out of the tent as the figure collided with me, and we both went crashing to the ground. The man, because up close I could tell it was a man, didn't punch or grapple like a normal attacker. He clawed at my face, hands raking across my skin like talons. His scream was high-pitched and twisted, almost gleeful. I slashed with the blade, cutting into his hand before losing my grip on the knife. The cut was shallow, but it was enough. He recoiled, shrieking again, before bolting into the woods. I lay there trembling, blood warm on my skin, unsure if it was mine or his. The forest went silent, save for the sound of him crashing through branches, fading into the distance. I retrieved the knife and sat outside my tent, too afraid to lie down again. Every sound made me flinch. I spent the rest of the night clutching the blade, expecting him to return at any moment. When dawn finally came, I wasted no time. I packed my gear quickly, heart pounding with every snap of a twig. The hike back to my car was a blur, every shadow making me paranoid. When I finally reached the road, I sped away without looking back. I considered calling the police, but what would I say? That I had been camping illegally and was attacked by a man screaming like an animal? They would have shrugged, maybe even blamed me for being alone out there. So I stayed silent. Even now, the memory haunts me. The scream, the claws, the silhouette in the moonlight. It was not just the attack itself, but the question that lingers. Why was he there? How did he find me so far from civilization? He wasn't a camper. He wasn't lost. He came for me. And that night, in the heart of the wilderness, I realized solitude is not always peace. Sometimes, it is the perfect stage for nightmares. I haven't gone solo camping since, and I'm not sure I ever will again. There is something uniquely unsettling about the way fear lingers long after the moment has passed. It embeds itself in memory, shaping how you see the world, how you move through it, and how you trust the spaces around you. For the people who lived through these 3 stories, the end of summer was supposed to bring a sense of closure and comfort. Instead, it left them carrying invisible scars, haunted not just by what happened, but by the questions that remain unanswered. In the first story, a young man thought he understood the limits of his parents' home. He trusted their words when they said there was no basement, just a crawl space. That trust shattered when the tapping beneath his bedroom floor turned into scraping, dragging, and violent banging. When he found the hidden storm door buried under old construction materials, he stumbled onto a truth no one in his family knew existed. A secret basement where someone had lived, etched their madness into the walls, and possibly returned when he locked them out. Though the police found nothing, the memory of tally marks, grotesque drawings, and the sound of someone pounding furiously to get back inside is something that will never leave him. He went off to college, but his parents remained in that house, and while they promised to secure it, he cannot stop imagining the figure he saw sprinting into the dark, waiting for another chance to come home. In the second story, the disappearance of a stranger unfolded in quiet Montana countryside. A car abandoned on the side of the road seemed, at first, like nothing more than routine misfortune. But the driver never returned, and soon his absence became a missing persons case. The narrator felt a connection he couldn't explain, maybe because he had been the first to notice, maybe because he couldn't ignore the open door and the sense of dread it carried. His persistence led him to a maintenance shack hidden in overgrowth, a place where someone had clearly been living. And in that shack, a single bullet hole suggested violence had occurred. Before he or his brother could uncover more, the authorities took over and silenced the search. Weeks later, when he returned, the shack had vanished entirely, as though erased from existence. Was it dismantled by the county to cover evidence? Was it ever meant to be found at all? He is left with the uneasy feeling that he brushed up against something larger and darker, and he will never truly know what happened to the man who vanished on that lonely stretch of highway. And in the third story, a man sought solitude in the wilderness to honor a family tradition. What he found instead was terror in its rawest form. First came the strange swaying light in the distance, which vanished the moment he called out. Then the crashing footsteps in the dark, as though someone had been watching. Finally, the shadow outside his tent, standing silently in the moonlight, waiting. The attack that followed was animalistic. Primal screams that twisted human tones into something inhuman, clawing hands raking at his face. His blade saved him, but it also left him with the knowledge that whoever attacked him had not been some lost hiker or innocent passerby. This was intentional. Someone had tracked him down in that remote clearing, and they came prepared to harm. He left shaken, his trust in solitude shattered, and even though he survived, he has not returned to the woods since. What ties these three stories together is not just their timing at the end of summer, but the way they reveal how fragile safety truly is. We tell ourselves homes are secure, that highways are routine, that the wilderness is peaceful if we respect it. Yet these experiences prove otherwise. A home can conceal a hidden basement with markings of madness. A highway can lead to a disappearance that vanishes into silence. A clearing in the forest can become the stage for a predator's unhinged attack. The fear is not only in what happened, but in what remains unanswered. Who lived in that basement, carving tallies into the wood? Why do the authorities erase a shack that seemed central to a missing persons case? And what kind of man stalks another through the forest in the middle of the night, shrieking with inhuman rage? None of the narrators receive closure. Instead, they carry uncertainty, which is perhaps even worse than answers. Because when you do not know who or why or how, you cannot truly move on. There is also a chilling similarity in how all three narrators describe their instincts. Each one felt something was wrong before it fully revealed itself. The tapping in the floor that couldn't be explained, the unease of seeing a car door left open, the dread of a swaying light that went dark. They all tried to rationalize, to explain away their fear, until reality forced them to accept that their instincts had been right all along. Fear has a way of speaking before logic can catch up, and ignoring it can be dangerous. In many ways, these stories remind us that endings are not always neat. Summer should have ended with warmth, closure, and transition. Instead, it ended with unanswered questions, with lingering dread, with an understanding that sometimes the world is far darker than we allow ourselves to admit. For the young man who left his parents in the house with a hidden basement, there will always be a part of him that wonders what lies beneath their feet at night. For the man who watched a missing person's case disappear alongside a shack, every late August breeze brings back the memory of that bullet hole and the silence that followed. And for the camper who barely survived an attack in the wilderness, solitude will never again mean peace, it will mean vulnerability. These stories are not about the supernatural. They are about people, about the unknown, about the ways in which darkness manifests in ordinary places. That is what makes them so disturbing. You cannot say they are legends or fabrications. They happened. They left scars, and they could happen again. As summer fades and the air cools, we like to believe that the worst is behind us. That autumn will usher in calm. But for some, the end of summer is not the closing of one chapter. It is the opening of a wound that never heals. And once you have glimpsed what hides in basements, on highways, and in forests, the comfort of the season will never feel the same again. When we think of summer ending, we picture golden sunsets, the last barbecues, and quiet evenings before the seasons turn. But for those who live these stories, the end of summer marked not comfort, but horror. 3 different people in 3 different places, each found themselves staring into a darkness they never expected. The scars remain. The first discovered that the very foundation of his family's home was hiding something unthinkable. A basement no one knew existed, filled with markings that spoke of obsession, madness, and something inhuman scratching at the walls. He may have left for college, but the fear stayed behind with his parents. The idea that someone lived in secret beneath them for who knows how long is a truth that will never fade. The second stumbled into a mystery that was never meant to be solved. An abandoned car, a missing man, a shack with evidence of violence, and then silence. The authorities took over, the shack vanished, and the truth dissolved into whispers. To this day, he cannot escape the thought that he saw something real, something that should have brought answers, only to watch it disappear, as if it had never existed. The third wanted nothing more than peace in the wilderness, a chance to honor a tradition. Instead, he was hunted in the night. A faceless man shrieking like an animal tore into him with claws, forcing him to fight for his life with a blade. He survived, but solitude is forever changed. What once was comfort is now danger, because he knows that in the quiet of the woods, monsters walk on two legs. What all of these stories teach us is chillingly simple. Safety is fragile, and the world is never as secure as we want to believe. Homes can hide secrets. Roads can lead to disappearances. Forests can conceal predators. And sometimes the true horror is not knowing who was behind it, why it happened, or whether it might happen again. If you ever find yourself in a similar situation, remember this: trust your instincts. If something feels wrong, it usually is. Do not dismiss the tapping under the floor, the car door left ajar, the figure in the clearing. Fear exists for a reason. It is there to keep you alive. Secure your surroundings, call for help, and never let complacency blind you to the dangers hidden in plain sight. The end of summer is supposed to mark a transition, a peaceful shift into autumn. But as these stories prove, it can also reveal the thin line between comfort and terror. And sometimes, once you've crossed that line, there is no going back. If you want to hear more true stories where reality is far darker than fiction, subscribe to The Price Paid. Because the truth is, when summer ends, not everyone makes it to fall.